Hello, everyone, and welcome to Center for Spiritual Living Rogue Valley in Medford, Oregon. I'm Kimberly Hawkins, Senior Minister and Spiritual Director here, and I am so grateful you decided to join us for our Sunday celebration. It is summer solstice today, first day of summer, and of course, it is also Father's Day. So from CSL Rogue Valley, wishing all the fathers out there, whether you're biological fathers, stepfathers, adoptive fathers, or simply someone who has served in that beautiful role of provider and mentor to someone younger, we honor you today. We are a radically inclusive, loving community dedicated to teaching spiritual tools to transform personal lives and help make a world that works for everyone. If you happen to be here for the first time joining us, a special welcome. We honor everyone no matter where you may happen to be on your own personal spiritual journey. This morning, we are so grateful to have a beautiful vocalist with us, Alexa Ehrlich, a member of our community here. And she has an opening song for us. I invite you to sing along if you know the words. Alexa.
Woke up this morning with my mind stayed on spirit. Woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Woke up this morning with my mind stayed on peace. Woke up this morning with my mind stayed on peace. Woke up this morning with my mind stayed on peace. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Now love. Woke up this morning with my mind stayed on love. Woke up this morning with my mind stayed on love. Woke up this morning with my mind stayed on love. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah.
So continuing that prayer Alexa so beautifully sang, I invite us all now to go within for a moment. We absolutely know that that spirit, that creator of all that is the source of all life is freedom, is peace, is love, unconditional love, and that peace that passeth understanding. It is oneness and harmony. It is wholeness, and it is infinite abundance of all good, ever available to each one of its offspring. We are individual incarnations of that one spirit, and this is the truth of everyone on the planet, all of us, spiritual siblings, if you will. And so I am grateful to join this morning with everyone, the small crew in this room and the larger crew around the world, to celebrate our divinity, our oneness, in the hopes of uplifting our hearts, reminding us of the spiritual truth of who we are, inspiring us to speak kind words, to recognize the divine in each one, and to live from the truth of who we are, divine beings as well as spiritual beings. And great gratitude for this time together, and gratitude for all the fathers out there, the love, the care, the attendance that each one gives to all of us on the planet. I release this word, knowing, as all prayers, it is heard, it is answered, it is done. And we say together, and so it is. Amen. For our reading this morning, I've chosen a short story that reminds us of the importance of a father's love, a father's care and attention. It involves a man who came home late from work one time, tired and irritated, and found his 5-year-old boy waiting for him at the door. "Daddy, may I ask you a question?" Dad replied, "Yeah, sure, what is it?" "Daddy, how much money do you make an hour?" The dad got mad and said, "That's none of your business. Why do you want to know?" The little boy said, "I just want to know. Please tell me, how much do you make an hour?" The dad, wanting to sit down and relax, said, "Well, if you must know, I make $20 an hour." The little boy sighed and bowed his head. Looking up, he asked, "Daddy, may I borrow $10, please?" The father flew off the handle at this point. If the only reason you wanted to know how much money I make is so that you can hit me up for some cash to buy some toy, then you march yourself straight to your room and go to bed. You're so selfish. I work long, hard hours every day, and I don't have time for this. The little boy quietly went to his room and shut the door. Dad sat down and started to get even madder about the nerve of his little boy. How dare he ask questions about only to get some money? After an hour or so, though, he had calmed down and started to think that maybe he was a little hard on his boy. Maybe his son really needed money for something important. And so the father went up to the boy's room and opened the door. "Are you asleep, son?" "No, Daddy, I'm awake." "I've been thinking maybe I was too hard on you earlier. It's been a long day, and I took it out on you. Here's that $10 you asked for." The little boy sat up straight, beaming. "Oh, thank you, Daddy," he exclaimed. Then, reaching under his pillow, he pulled out a wad of crumpled bills. The dad, seeing the boy already had some money, started to get angry again. The little boy slowly counted out his money and then looked up at his dad. The dad, now ticked off, demanded to know what was going on. "Why did you want more money if you already had some?" The little boy replied, "Because I didn't have enough, but now I do, Daddy. I have $20 now, and I'd like to buy an hour of your time." What a beautiful reminder that time and love are the most important things our dads can give us that we can give anybody. Happy Father's Day to everybody. And back to Alexa now.
I'd like to dedicate this song to all the fathers out there, living and passed on, and I hope this reminds you of them. I remember Daddy's hands folded silently in prayer and reaching out to hold me when I had a nightmare. You could read quite a story in the calluses and lines. Years of work and worry had left their mark behind. I remember Daddy's hands, how they held my mama tight and patted my back for something done right. There are things that I'd forgotten that I loved about the man, but I'll always remember the love in Daddy's hands. Daddy's hands were soft and kind when I was crying. Daddy's hands were hard as steel when I'd done wrong. Daddy's hands weren't always gentle, but I've come to understand there was always love in Daddy's hands. I remember Daddy's hands working till they bled, sacrificed and selfishly just to keep us all fed. And if I could do things over, I'd live my life again and never take for granted the love in Daddy's hands. Daddy's hands were soft and kind when I was crying. Daddy's hands were hard as steel when I'd done wrong. Daddy's hands weren't always gentle, but I've come to understand there was always love in Daddy's hands. Daddy's hands were soft and kind hard as steel when I'd done wrong. Daddy's hands were always gentle, but I've come to understand there was always love in Daddy's hands.
Touching song, Alexa. Thank you so very much. First time I've heard you sing country. Nice job. I think we should add, too, that we honor grandpas and great-grandpas and great-great-grandpas, too, also with love in their hands. This morning, my talk title, and the talk title for many centers for spiritual living around the globe, is Mindful Speech. Last week, I talked about what is mindful, what does it mean? And we basically defined it as being aware and present, completely aware and completely present in the now moment. Not mindful, F-U-L-L, with our thoughts going all over the place to the past, the future, and being cluttered, but being centered. And at the same time, being aware of our feelings and our thoughts and our bodily sensations. So this idea of mindful speech, I think, is very important. It's actually one of the tenets of the Buddhist Noble Eightfold Path. The Buddha called it right speech, and he defined it as abstaining from things like false speech, lying, abstaining from abusive or divisive speech, the kind of speech that puts divisions between people, or hateful speech. It's also not engaging in idle speech or gossip, if you will. And right speech is clustered with three of the Eightfold Path tenets that have to do with our behavior. So it's right conduct, right livelihood, and right speech. Now, the Buddha thought that ethical conduct needed to be built on universal love and compassion. When we hear the Dalai Lama speak today, we hear him talking a lot about compassion. But the Buddha also stressed the need to develop not only compassion, which comes from our hearts, but wisdom, which is compassionate thoughts that come from our mind or our head. I think that we tend to think of spiritual practices as formal things, like sitting on the meditation cushion in the morning, or in my case, my meditation prayer, or praying, or attending or listening to a spiritual service like we're all doing right now. But really, I think we're called to do spiritual practices all the time in our daily life. And I believe if we each committed to practicing right or mindful speech, it would be deeply transformative in terms of allowing ourselves to be peaceful and at ease and connected with others as well as the divine. And it would also promote harmony globally among all of us. It hurts my heart, and I'm sure it hurts many of your hearts, to see and hear the incredibly divisive speech that is going on, especially in this country right now politically. On so many issues, we are very strictly divided, which is okay. I think democracy is built on the need to have free speech and to have differing opinions and to vote our conscience. But I think what it is not okay is the way we are accustomed now to judging each other, slurring epithets, hurling epithets, and really hateful speech. Really, if we could simply remember that we are all divine beings. We all have one Father, Mother, God. We all come from the same source, and we are each divine. And if we could at least have reverence for each other and keep that in mind when we speak to each other, it would be so, so powerful. And I got to admit, I'm as guilty as the next one. Watching TV and seeing somebody who has a very different political view than mine, I think judgmental thoughts. I even say judgmental things sometimes. I'm trying to be better at that. I have shared a practice that I've engaged in and need to do more, which is to look at somebody with whom I really disagree and I'm ready to judge, and to use their name and say, I accept you, you fill in the name. I bless you, you fill in the name. And to really say that over and over again till we can really feel it for one another. Back in, I think it was the 14th century, the Sufi poet Hafiz said this. He said, why not be polite? Everyone is God speaking. Why not be polite and listen to him? Isn't that a beautiful way to think of it? That even when somebody's expressing something we don't agree with, we want to argue with, to think of them as God expressing him or herself. You know, and maybe fortunately or unfortunately in our world today, there's so many other ways we can speak to one another, right? Not just face-to-face or through letters, but through social media, on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook. And I think in some ways it's so much easier not to see the divinity in the person we're speaking to when we're doing it over social media. It's easy to not be mindful when we're posting something. And it's really interesting because preparing for this talk on mindful speech, you know how I've shared before, things happen to kind of take me deeper in this topic and in this practice. And I wanted to share with you that last Sunday evening, because racism was so heavy on my heart, we've been seeing it so much in the news, examples of racial hatred and violence, becoming more aware, thank God, of the truth that we have systemic racism in this country. I decided before I went to bed to do a change on my Facebook page. I took my profile picture, and I didn't change the picture, but I did what many of you have done. I put a frame around the picture, and the frame said, Black Lives Matter. And I didn't think a whole lot about it. It was just an act of supporting my brothers and sisters who happen to be people of color. The next morning when I woke up, there were a couple comments already, and one of them was pretty angry. I'm going to share just a piece of it and talk about my journey dealing with that and how to deal with that this week. The person wrote, I take this, meaning my Black Lives Matter frame, as you've clearly taken a righteous social justice stance. You've clearly taken a political stance. You've clearly decided there's an actual side to be on and have declared separation real. You've decided to silence opposition. You're no longer a credible spiritual leader and have failed the community. You are fake. You don't speak truth or come from pure love or oneness. You're fearful yourself, have an agenda, and are indeed a contributor to oppression, control, and manipulation of people by playing on their emotions and fears. That's part of what the person wrote. I won't read the whole thing. And the person ended with this phrase or sentence, you might need to find new employment soon. Needless to say, when I read that, I was shocked. I was dismayed. I felt personally attacked. And I wasn't sure what to do. You know, I think it's fine for us to disagree, as I've said before. I truly believe racism exists. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I don't think speaking out against racism is a political stance. I think it's a stance for spiritual values, for the value of each person living. And I understand that there are folks who disagree. So I didn't respond right away. I was a little paralyzed, to tell you the truth. I didn't know what to do. And what happened is other people commented. And I was relieved to see that nobody attacked the person that wrote the original post. It was pretty respectful. One person did write something about, this is the most judgmental post I've ever seen. I wonder if you're willing to learn what is behind the activism heart. Someone else wrote about, gosh, I think I remember a Jewish carpenter named Jesus who did take a social justice stance. But interestingly, what happened, a dialogue ensued that was fairly respectful. And so the person who posted the original post was engaging in the dialogue without being angry or judgmental. So that was a good thing. In the end, I ended up taking down all the posts because I felt like my personal Facebook page was becoming a forum for some disagreement. And I wrote to the person who sent the original post. And I said, Thank you for starting the dialogue. I think it's important for us to talk with one another when we don't agree, respectfully. I appreciate that. What I don't appreciate is the tone of your original post. And I let it go at that. And I'm not sure still if I won't want to say more, but I am so convinced that when we don't yell at each other, when we don't react, then we bring about the ability to communicate and to hear one another. And I think part of mindful speech and right speech, as the Buddha conceived of it, is also mindful listening. And so we need to be able to listen to each other even when we disagree with each other, even when someone appears to be attacking us. And what I know is when anyone reacts with anger, it really likely has to do with deep hurts from our past. And so part of mindful speech and mindful listening, I think, is being willing to heal what comes up for us. And so if we're wanting to react, then the idea is to look at, what in me is upset here? It's not necessarily the person who's saying this. It's how was I treated in the past that I feel that way? And if I can identify that and get through that, I can probably respond instead of react. Martin Luther King said this. He said, "We will have to repent in this generation, not merely for the hateful words and actions of the bad people, but for the appalling silence of the good people." I would reframe that a little bit. As much as I love Martin Luther King, I don't believe there are bad people and good people. I believe there are people who make maybe bad decisions or are misguided. But his point is that we need to speak up. And so I feel called to engage in this dialogue, even when it's with people who disagree with me, but to do it in a way that I can truly listen to their point of view and respectfully present my own. And on the topic of racism, I think it's especially important, especially right now. We're doing a book study in our community of Layla Saad's book, which is called Me and White Supremacy. The subtitle is Combat Racism, Change the World, and Become a Good Ancestor. And Layla Saad speaks about white privilege, white supremacy, tone policing, where we want somebody of color who's angry not to be too angry so we can hear them. White fragility is another term we hear where, we don't really want to hear anger. And we need to understand the pain that people of color have gone through. So here's a quote from Layla Saad. She said, "White silence is violence. White silence is violence. It actively protects the system. It says, I'm okay with the way things are because they do not negatively affect me and because I enjoy the benefits I receive with white privilege." So I'm grateful for this incident early this week to remind me not to be silent, but not to react, to listen, to be a mindful listener, to remember that everyone who speaks, as Hafiz said, is God speaking. And if I can remember that and see that, I'm going to invite a dialogue that perhaps people really listen to one another and we can reach an understanding rather than this hurling of invectives that we have become so used to. I also know that because our reactions and our anger often stem from early hurts, as I said, that self-care and self-love is very important. Not just listening to other people, but listening to our own hearts when they're hurt. And I heard a practice this week on a podcast that I'd like to share with you that I thought was a beautiful idea. I believe it was a psychologist who recommended when you wake up in the morning, place your hand over your heart and say, "Good morning, Kimberly. I love you." Or whatever your name is. "Good morning, Jason. I love you." What a beautiful way to start the day and to set us on a path of mindfulness of our own feelings, and then translates easily to mindfulness of everybody we interact with. There's a really poignant story that I wanted to share with you. It's a Zen parable. And it speaks to this idea that we teach in Science of Mind, that we can create heaven or hell on earth. And I think when we engage in invectives and judging and fighting with one another verbally, we create hell. We don't create peace, yes? I mean, you can feel into that one. So here's the way the story goes. There was a big, tough samurai who once went to see a little monk. "Monk," he barked in a voice accustomed to instant obedience, "teach me about heaven and hell." The monk looked up at the mighty warrior and replied with utter disdain, "Teach you about heaven and hell? I couldn't teach you anything. You're dumb, you're dirty, you smell, you're a disgrace, an embarrassment to the samurai class. Get out of my sight, I can't stand you." The samurai, needless to say, got furious. He shook, red in the face, speechless with rage, pulled out his sword and prepared to slay the little monk. Looking straight into the samurai's eyes, the monk said softly, "That's hell." The samurai froze, realizing the compassion of the monk who had literally risked his life in order to teach the samurai about hell. He dropped his sword, he fell to his knees, filled with gratitude. And at that point, the monk said softly to him, "And that's heaven." Wow, what a lesson, right? And I'd venture to say if that samurai reacted with such anger, there's stuff within him, who knows what kind of an upbringing he had, or perhaps fighting wars and not being able to heal his hurts, that caused him to react. But to remember that through our thoughts, through our words, we can indeed create heaven or create hell for ourselves and for everyone else. We have the freedom to choose. So then there's this issue when we think about right speech, mindful speech, of white lies. Yeah, I know I've told them in my time. I have a list here of 12 of the most common white lies we tell. You may have heard or even uttered some of these. First, "It wasn't me." "Gee, you haven't changed a bit." "What a cute baby." "We're just friends." "That looks pretty good on you." "Thank you, dinner was delicious." "Sorry I'm late, there was really bad traffic." "I'm 5 minutes away." "Oh, I'm busy that day." "Oh yeah, I remember you." "I'm fine, how are you?" And, "No, officer, I don't know why you pulled me over." So, why do we tell white lies? Well, sometimes we tell them to spare somebody's feelings. We don't want to share the truth with them when we feel it might be hurtful. Oftentimes we tell a white lie, I think, to protect ourselves. If I'm late, I don't want to look bad, and so if I say traffic was bad, maybe it wasn't so bad that I was as late as I was, but at least it kind of lets myself off the hook. And I think that's normal. I mean, we have this tendency as humans to want to protect ourselves, to preserve ourselves. The animal kingdom has it. They have camouflage to deceive their enemies, right? But I just want to caution myself and all of us that it can be a slippery slope, that if we're not practicing mindful speech regularly, we can so easily fall into a habit of feeling like, oh, I deceived somebody in that instance. It's okay to deceive somebody in another instance. So just, I guess in my life, what I am focusing on right now is an attempt to be as truthful as I can in a kind way without actually telling a lie or deceiving somebody. Another little story that kind of indicates the danger of deception or just not telling the truth. I remember once somebody telling me, don't ever put something in writing that you're not prepared to follow through with because, it's there. But the same is true really for our speech. And the other idea is that if we don't tell lies, we don't have to have a good memory, right? Because we don't have to remember the lie and contribute to it. So here's this little story. I call it the soup ladle story. Some of you may have heard this one. A man named John invites his mother over for dinner. During the meal, his mother can't help but notice how handsome John's roommate is. And over the course of the evening, while watching the two interact, she starts to wonder if there's more between John and the roommate than she's been told. Reading his mom's thoughts, John pulls his mother aside and says, "I know what you must be thinking, Mom, but I assure you, Mark and I are just roommates." About a week later, Mark says to John, "You know, ever since your mother came to dinner, I've been unable to find the silver gravy ladle. You don't suppose she took it, do you?" John says, "Well, I doubt it, but I'll write her an email just to be sure." So he sits down at his computer and he writes, "Dear Mother, I'm not saying you did take a gravy ladle from my house, and I'm not saying you did not take a gravy ladle, but the fact remains one has been missing ever since you were here for dinner." Later that day, John receives an email from his mother that reads, "Dear son, I'm not saying that you do sleep with Mark, and I'm not saying that you do not sleep with Mark, but the fact remains that if he was sleeping in his own bed, he would have found the gravy ladle by now. Love, Mom." So poor John, caught in his deception. Yeah, I think many of us can relate to that. So this idea of how important our speech, our words are, what we send into the universe, whether it's to someone else or just to ourselves or to the world, we believe in Science of Mind that our thoughts are creative. In the beginning was the Word, right? In the Bible creation story, it was God's Spirit's words that created the manifest universe. In Science of Mind and New Thought traditions, we believe our thoughts, our prayers, our words create our reality. So it is so important, because we have the freedom to choose our words, to choose words that are compassionate, words that are loving, words that serve to create the life and the world we're willing and desiring to see and to live within. It is not a small matter. We may dismiss it as, oh, you know, I can just have an outburst and call somebody out and be cruel, but it is no small matter. It's interesting that hospice workers who are privy to a person's last moments on earth when they're reevaluating their lives and maybe talking about things they're grateful for or regrets, a common regret among the dying is something like this expressed: "I wish I had had the courage to express my feelings, to speak what was true for me, and to do it in an honest way, a kind way," I would add to that. And this idea of speaking out right now, speaking out against racism, speaking out against injustice, there's a poignant quote I heard this week from a man named Martin Niemöller. He was a German Lutheran pastor during the Holocaust. And he said this: "First they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I'm not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me." Words for food for thought, eh? Yeah. So again, this idea, which is really the primary teaching in our philosophy, that we are one. What hurts one hurts us all. When we hurt another person through our words, we're hurting ourselves. We're not being true to ourselves. And I am not saying this because I am the pinnacle of perfection in this area. I am not. I'm learning along with all the rest of us. But I'm committing, especially through this process of our book study and looking at racism, I'm committing to being thoughtful about what I say and to having the courage to speak up, as Martin Niemöller so beautifully expressed, to speak up. We need to be able to name things that are going on, to name what's true, whether it be racism, social injustice, global warming, pollution of our air and water, the inhumane treatment of animals, all of it. We can't sweep it under the carpet. And I also invite us to engage in respectful dialogue with those who disagree with us on any of these issues that really, in my belief system, are not political issues. They're spiritual issues. We are stewards of this beautiful earth. It was given to us. We are stewards of these beautiful lives. We are stewards of our brothers and sisters. We're here to practice love, to practice compassion, and to speak with both compassion from our hearts and wisdom from our minds. I want to close with a couple quotes before we go into prayer. Be sure to taste your words before you spit them out. The tongue has no bones, but is strong enough to break a heart. So be careful with your words. Let's go into prayer. Once again, I'm called to simply recognize this one life, this one power, this one presence that spoke the world into existence, that created each one of us, all powerful, all knowing, everywhere present, everywhere. And so just as Hafiz reminded us, each person speaking is God speaking, is an incarnation, an expression of that one divine life. When we can recognize spirit in and through everything as love and harmony, as unity, as wholeness, as beauty, as order. When we can have compassion in our hearts and think and respond before we react out of our own hurts, knowing that hurting people hurt others, we become the expression that God meant and intended us to be here. Mindful speech, right speech that honors all of life, that is in reverence to all of life, but is also courageous, having the courage to speak truth, to recognize injustice, to recognize what needs to be shifted, and to engage in dialogue with one another. Let's come together in a peaceful dialogue, in a dialogue that is reverent, that comes from the heart, that comes from that place where we know our oneness, even when we disagree. Let us remember, if there was just one spiritual practice that we put into play every moment, right speech, mindful speech, has the power to create heaven on earth. For me, experiencing freedom and connection and peace, and also for the world. So important. May God bless each one of us, no matter our political beliefs, no matter the color of our skin, no matter our sexual orientation, knowing that each of us is a precious divine being. We are spiritual siblings, and it is possible through right listening and right speech to create a world that works for everyone. I say a special word of blessing this morning or this afternoon, if that's when you're listening. I say a word of blessing for all the fathers, the grandfathers, all the figures of those who have provided and nurtured, as Alexa so beautifully sang about, the love, whether it was hands that were providing for us, hands that were comforting us, hands that were lovingly disciplining us. We bless fathers and grandfathers of all kinds. I bless people around the globe standing up now for what they believe, whether it's protesting or debating. But I also invite each of us and the divine within each of us to help us, to guide us, to be reverent, to be kind, to be compassionate as we disagree and as we come together to make decisions about our country and our world. in gratitude to speak these truths, in gratitude for each one listening. I release this prayer knowing it's heard, it's answered. And we say together, and so it is. Amen. And Alexa Ehrlich has another beautiful song for us.
Now, this next song is about the power kindness has on people, and that words can save a life. Some kids have and some kids don't, and some of us are wondering why. Mom won't watch the news at night, there's too much stuff that's making her cry. We need some help. You can ride your new bike to school. A kind of world where mom and dad still believe in the golden rule. Life's not that simple. Down here on earth, a thousand prayers, a million words, but one voice was heard. One voice, one simple word, hearts know what to say. One dream can change the world. Keep believing till you find your way. Yesterday while walking home, I saw some kid on Newberry Road. He pulled a pistol from his bag and tossed it in the river below. Thanks for the help. Down here on earth, a thousand prayers, a million words, but one voice was heard. One voice was heard. One voice was heard.
Our thanks to Alexa for that beautiful reminder of the power of kind words. One voice can make a difference, can save a life. What a beautiful song. Thank you so much, Alexa. It's time now when we talk about another spiritual practice. We've talked about mindful speech, sacred giving. I want to thank everyone who has continued to support us through this time of social distancing and not meeting in person. We are so grateful to be able to continue to bring you a Sunday celebration. And I'm also noting with gratitude that we've had viewers from other countries around the world. And I'm wanting us right now, if you're able, to think about supporting. The idea of sacred giving is to be mindful, to be aware of the good that comes into your life, and to be willing to share a portion of it to the places where you are spiritually fed. So if you're able and you're willing now to give a gift, we welcome that. And our affirmation goes like this. If you would place your hand over your heart, we say, this divine love through me blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, and all that I circulate. And so it is. There are several ways you can give to Center for Spiritual Living Rogue Valley. You can give on our website, cslroguevalley.org. Just hit the donate button. By the way, we are now prepared to accept gifts from out of the country. We had one person tell us he tried and he couldn't. Now he can and did. You can also call 1-800-675-7430 and use your credit card. You can also mail a check to P.O. Box 1458, Medford, Oregon 97501. We invite you to stay connected on our Facebook page. There's a place to sign up for our email list and receive our weekly e-newsletter with events. And to keep you up to speed, we have a morning spiritual practice call on Zoom 6 days a week that we invite you to join in. It is not too late to join us this week, week 2 of our book study, Me and White Supremacy. You can email me, please, if you would like to join. I will send you the link, Rev Kimberly, Kimberly, at cslroguevalley.org. That email is on our website. That group meets 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock on Wednesday afternoons for the next 5 weeks. Monday, our practitioner Laura Stewart starts another delightful book study on the Dalai Lama's cat. It's a beautiful, lighthearted, but deeply spiritual novel, and they'll be talking about the spiritual lessons therein. So those are 2 ways to connect with us. Please do. Our Facebook page is another way to stay in touch. So that's it for announcements. I'm going to, once again, turn things over to Alexa for our closing song. Alexa.
And everyone, feel free to sing along if you know the words back at home. I am opening up in sweet surrender to the luminous love light of the One. I am opening up in sweet surrender to the luminous love light of the One. I am opening. I am opening. I am opening. I am opening. I am opening up in sweet surrender to the luminous love light of the One. I am opening up in sweet surrender to the luminous love light of the One. I am opening. I am opening. I am opening. I am opening.
May we all open this week, surrender to the luminous love light of the One, that luminous light that lights each of our hearts, that wants to connect with all the other luminous lights. Bless you. I love you. A special blessing to all you fathers and grandfathers. Peace be with you. See you next week.